Now, performativity is a concept that can be traced back to J.L. Austin's classic book, How to Do Things with Words. To tell the truth, I don't exactly remember when I'm talking to you now when he wrote it, but somewhere in the 1960s, I believe. And that in that book, Austin, who was a philosopher of language, said that certain sentences actually do something. So we have constantives, which is like, this is a chair, and we have declaratives like, I am here now, and we have performatives, which is, I promise you, or I will marry you, or I christen this boat. In other words, words that actually do things. Now, this set a lot of people off thinking, not simply about language, but about actions that are also performative, actions that do things or accomplish things. Prior to Austin, we probably thought of performance actions framed by dramas and plays, and whether they were in Japan or in South Africa or China or Western Europe, within the aesthetic genres. But with Austin, we began to think of the performative, the actual doing of something by performance, by speaking, by gesturing, because we're taking a broader view of what constitutes language. There's body language, there's gestural language. Not only is there spoken and written language. Austin's ideas joined with two other kinds of key ideas to form the basis of the performative. One is Erving Goffman, whose presentation of self in everyday life, and especially the chapter on performances, talks about how we are always structuring our lives as performances. As Goffman said famously, all the world's not a stage, but specifying how it's not is not so easy to do. In other words, he took off on Shakespeare and said, it's really not so, but it is so that all the world's a stage. The other person that Austin conjoined with, although they were actual academically and fighting with each other, was John Searle and his theory of speech acts. And Searle is somewhat like Austin, but somewhat different. And Searle's notion of speech acts, again, says that when you speak, you're actually doing something. Then you combine that with people like Jacques Derrida, one of the most well-known post-structuralist French philosopher of language and general philosopher as well, who said, that we are always performing a text. There is nothing outside the text, is Derrida's most famous single-most statement. But by text, he did not just mean written text. He meant performance text. He meant behavior text. And although, and from my point of view, I want to say that language is not first, so I want to update the performative. I want to update Derrida. I want to update Austin and say that what is basic is embodied behavior. That language is derivative from embodied behavior. We had bodies before we had language. We were primates and apes before we were humans, before we had this larynx. So for me, speech is a specialized kind of embodied behavior, not the other way around, that behavior is a specialized kind of text. That is central to the whole approach of performance studies. Embodied behavior is primary. Speech is a specialized kind of embodied behavior. It's not the other way around. Text as writing or anything that's like writing is secondary. The body is first. That's essential to the approach of performance studies. So when we reinterpret performativity in performance studies terms, I want to always root it in experience, in experienced behavior, in embodied behavior. And from there, we can generate out to all the other kinds of cultural products, performative writing, various forms of textuality. After all, text itself is a word that's related to the word textile. It means to weave. It has nothing to do with writing. It's an activity of making something singular out of something multiple, of taking many, many threads and making a cloth. So that's a form of performance. That is embodied behavior. This, I think, is something that you should not forget as you study, because we're moving, performance studies is being pulled towards kind of cultural studies, towards reducing or thinking of everything as written text. That's the influence of the French post-structuralists. They're brilliant. Foucault, Derrida, the whole bunch of them. But you should take their brilliance and make sure that you use it in terms of pragmatism also, experience, this other kind of philosophy, which is English and American, so that we have a kind of dialogue between the French hyper-rationality and the Anglo-American practicality. That will give us, from my point of view, the right flavor for performativity.